He admits to firing his shotgun 3 times. He says that all 3 shots struck the victim.
Court testimony reveals disturbing new details about what happened the day Ahmaud Arbery was shot dead in a South Georgia neighborhood.
Ahmaud Arbery was chased, hunted down, and ultimately executed at the hands of these men.
The 3 men, Travis McMichael, his father, Gregory McMichael, and their neighbor, William Roddy Bryan, all 3 face charges in Arbery's death.
Stop, what's that? Is it? Stop. Travis!
The 911 call made by Gregory McMichael reveals what was said in those moments leading up to the shooting. In court, a state police investigator reveals that Travis McMichael used the N-word, referring to the man he had just fatally shot.
Mr. Bryan said that after the shooting took place, before police arrival, while Mr. Arbery was on the ground, that he heard Travis McMichael make the statement.
Ahmaud Arbery's mother devastated by the testimony.
To learn that after my son laid there in the streets dead, that he didn't feel any type of remorse at all. He continued to use the word that he used. Despite he had killed him, he was dead. Very, very heartbreaking.
During the 7-hour preliminary hearing, the agent testified that Travis McMichael had used a racial slur on numerous occasions, according to phone records.
On the Instagram post, somebody sends him, this is on January 2nd of 2020, someone sends him a video or a picture. We were not able to recover that from the phone. That's one of the reasons why I have a search warrant out for Instagram. They send that out. He says, makes the comment, that would only be better if they'd have blown that N-words, or had blown that N-words head off.
The agent testified that Travis, who previously served in the Coast Guard, also made racial comments about a boating job.
He made a statement that he loved his job because he was out on a boat and there weren't any N-words anywhere.
Testimony revealed that Travis McMichael's co-defendant, William Roddy Bryan, also made racist inferences, and ironically, this all came to light after a question from Bryan's own attorney.
Is there any evidence that race played a role in the actions of Roddy Bryan on 2/23/20?
There's evidence that of Roddy Bryan's racist attitude in his communications.
Okay.
And from that, I extrapolate the reason why he made assumptions he did that day of what was occurring. He saw a man running down the road with a truck following, and I believe he made certain assumptions that were at least in part based upon his racial bias.
Kevin Goff, Bryan's defense attorney, downplayed this revelation.
Well, certainly wasn't the answer I was expecting, but then again, I didn't see any evidence of it today.
He says the GBI needs his client's testimony if they want to convict Travis and Greg McMichael.
Ironically, the star witness for the prosecution is supposed to be Mr. Bryan. I don't know how they're going to do that. You know, they've taken the Mockingbird. You're familiar with the book. It's a sin to kill a mockingbird. Well, the one thing worse than killing a mockingbird is trying to turn it into a canary. They had a mockingbird, and they stepped on it and they trashed it.
The attorney for Ahmaud Arbery's family says those racist comments made by the defendants will likely not play a big role in the upcoming trial.
Racial epithet actually doesn't add much to the prosecution here, except for the fact that this wasn't an accident or self-defense, but this was hatred that was motivating his action.
In the meantime, the mother of Ahmaud Arbery grieves the loss of her son and reflects on the last moments of his life.
He was afraid. Life had put him in a position where I couldn't protect him. And unfortunately, he was not able to protect himself.
It's a big issue. And I know Lee Merritt's saying it's not going to play a big role, but it could very well play a huge role in this case, because ultimately, this case is about intent and motivation and what is inside the minds of the 3 men charged with murder. And does this answer the question is really, I think, what prosecutors are going to grapple with. Let me bring in Julie Janae, Court TV crime and justice reporter, with us tonight. Oh, there she is. Okay. Julia, let me start here. 2 of the 3 defendants, yesterday in that preliminary hearing, we heard statements about racial slurs that they have spoken or communicated in one way or another. How about the third defendant, Greg McMichael?
In that hearing yesterday, not only was it not mentioned, it also was not brought up by any of the questions. It was not something that was brought out in the testimony by that GBI agent. A lot of those racial slurs that were mentioned in our story came out during the defense attorney's cross-examination of that agent, where they dug into whether or not there were more statements by Travis McMichael or whether Roddy Bryan had any other statements that he had made. That's when a lot of those came out. Anything further than what the prosecution brought out, which was that initial racial slur that was made when Ahmaud Arbery was shot. But the father, Gregory McMichael, nothing said about him during that hearing about his either racial inferences that he may have made in the past or any slurs that he may have used. But a lot of that information came from cell phones of Roddy Bryan and of Travis McMichael. So it's unclear if Gregory McMichael's cell phone was given the same examination as those other two.
Something else with Greg McMichael I want to talk about is what he did right after the shooting. Let's take a listen because he makes a couple of phone calls from the scene. Let's hear what the testimony was yesterday.
You mentioned the fact that you investigated whether there was any contact by Greg McMichael with the Glenn County or Brunswick Judicial Circuit office in this case, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And when was the first contact that you were able to identify where defendant Greg McMichael was attempting to contact his former employer?
That would have been the day that the shooting occurred.
Do you know where he was when he attempted that contact?
Yes, the investigator told me to believe that he was still on scene.
From the scene, so he's calling his old employer. That's the DA's office, right?
That's the district attorney, Jackie Johnson's office. That is where he used to work, where he was an investigator. And it's also the issue that created a conflict of interest for that office. They passed off the case to someone else. There was not a lot more information that was given at this preliminary hearing as to what may have been said or what that meant that he was calling his former boss. But we know that there are a lot of eyes that are looking at how this case was handled. And there's federal investigations into whether or not there was not only potential hate crimes for these three defendants, but also whether or not there was some sort of a cover-up, whether these district attorneys in that area did not properly handle this. So knowing that the defendant was calling his former boss while he's there at the crime scene, and this is the agency that would be potentially investigating and prosecuting his son who had pulled the trigger.
I want to bring Rick King into the conversation. He's joining us tonight, trial attorney, former police lieutenant. Rick, great to see you. Let me start first with the first issue we dealt with, which was two of these three defendants, they're going through their cell phones, and then the alleged statement that's made right after the shooting, racial slurs, bleeping N-word. Does that reveal anything? Is that evidence that prosecutors may attempt to use to take the jury inside the head of Travis McMichael, the man who shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery?
So you're asking really two questions, though. The first question is, will prosecutors try to use that to take you into the head of Mr. McMichael, one of the McMichaels? And possibly they could. However, let's keep in mind that the statement that was made at the scene, according to Mr. Bryant, the rules of evidence might not allow that in.
And that's a huge, the way you got to get it in is you got to get it in through Roddy Bryan, but he's a defendant now. So it's going to be pretty difficult.
Exactly. Unless Mr. Bryant testifies, that statement doesn't come in, I don't believe.
And that's what his attorney was talking about, the mockingbird, the canary, all that.
Right.
Rick, do they need that evidence? Is I guess another question here. Do they need it to prove to this jury why this shooting took place? Because the defense is going to have their own version of things.
I don't think that they really need it. I think that the state has a pretty good case against the three defendants, And I don't think that it adds much to what they already have.
Do you think it interferes at all with the overall public? And what I'm talking about is you've got to get 12 people to come inside that courtroom.
Yes.
And with this information now out there, does that potentially eliminate a bunch of potential jurors who might be better for prosecutors than for the defense? People who know about that and say, I can't be fair and impartial.
And that's always the danger when you put out information like that. It's so prejudicial to the potential jury pool. So those statements, things like that, those inflammatory type statements, as horrible as they are, they form the basis of opinions for potential jurors. And in some cases, they're going to be disqualified because they won't be able to get beyond, and understandably, the statements of that defendant.
Right, and that eliminates a whole class of potential jurors. I want to take a listen to a testimony also about Travis McMichael. Again, he's the younger of the two. He's the one who has the shotgun. He was in the Coast Guard, and there was some information about his Coast Guard record yesterday. Let's take a listen.
For Travis McMichael, we have requested and obtained his Coast Guard training record and file, I believe. We've requested, I believe we've actually obtained it.
Why did you do that?
To understand what training he has received, during his interview with Glenn County Police Department, he states that his position as a boarding officer, that he knew from 30 to 40 yards away that Ahmaud Arbery was not going to surrender, was going to keep coming. And through that statement, I wanted to know what his training and experience was.
Was that important that he told you that? Did you find that significant at all?
I did. It helped confirm what I saw in the video, that he that when he got out, or when he's got the shotgun up, he's pointing at him, and they helped confirm that to me.
Julie, Janae, this is significant because 30 to 40 yards away, that's when the first alleged aggravated assault takes place, right? Because that's the underlying felony for the felony murder charge.
Right. It's that part of the video that it's a little bit difficult to see because the camera moves and you see Ahmaud Arbery avoiding the vehicle and then coming around. But it's something that Attorney Lee Merritt for the family brought up yesterday, that there's a contradiction in the statements because we have documents from the district attorneys who were moving these cases around that Travis McMichael said that the first shot was to the hand of Ahmaud Arbery as if it was a defensive move. But this statement sounds like it was directly at his chest when he was some ways away, which would be more of an offensive shot. So it definitely, those statements, they were commented on yesterday. There are many, they are lengthy from all three of these defendants, and that is something we know this prosecution is going to be using and pouring through.
All right, Julie, Janae, we'll see you at the bottom of the hour. Rick King, stay where you are. Up next, we're going to talk about the other case everyone's talking about, of course, out in Minneapolis. Now all 4 officers have been charged. But what exactly are the charges? What do prosecutors have to prove? What are the elements of the crimes? We're going to break it down for you like no other network can. That's next.